While Cortés was still dealing with Narvaez on the coast, Pedro de Alvarado was left in charge of the Spaniards in Tenochtitlan. During this period, there was a growing dissension in the leadership of the Aztecs. There was a faction of nobles who disagreed with Montezuma's approach in dealing with the Spaniards and wanted to expel them from the capital. On May 22, 1520, between 600 and 1,000 festival participants were preparing to perform a ceremony in honor of their god Tezcatlipoca for a festival known as Toxcatl near the main temple of the city. During the festival, the Aztecs brought out a young man to be sacrificed. This sparked an angry reaction from the Spaniards, who were already in an agitated state for having been in the capital for far too long. This was also an opportunity for them to loot the precious jewels and gold that the Aztec priests were wearing. Once the sacrificial victim was brought out, Alvarado ordered his men to attack the largely unarmed crowd. Nearly every single person was killed in this unexpected hostility, and all of this was done while Moctezuma was still under house arrest inside the palace where the Spaniards were staying. When Cortés returned to the capital, the Aztecs were in complete revolt against the Spaniards. The situation had gotten so bad that the Spaniards could no longer leave the palace in the city where they had been staying out of fear that they might be killed. Each time they left the palace hoping to make an escape, they came under attack from the Aztecs. The fighting was so intense that Spaniards who had been in military conflicts in Europe against the French and the Turks said that they had never encountered such intense fighting. Amidst the uproar, Cortés brought out Moctezuma so that he could speak with the angry crowd. A number of them stopped throwing objects and settled down to listen. Moctezuma said to them that if they had just stopped, the Spaniards would leave the city. In this exchange, some in the crowd stated that they chose a new leader, whose name was Cuitláhuac and was the lord of Iztapalapa, and he was chosen to replace the great Moctezuma. Moctezuma's pleading was of no use. The Aztecs were no longer willing to be placated by the Spaniards or Moctezuma. They had witnessed their capital occupied for the past 7 months, and they were disappointed that their leader was so weak and ineffective in navigating the situation. Some in the crowd began throwing stones, and one of them hit Moctezuma in the head, which later killed him. On the following night, Cortés and a number of Tlaxcalan allies, who were cooped up in the city with him, made an escape under the cover of darkness. Even so, on their way out, they suffered heavy losses. As many as 600 Spaniards were killed trying to escape the city, and more than 1,000 Tlaxcalans were also killed. This was the worst defeat suffered by the Spaniards up until this point. However, while on their march back to Tlaxcala, the Spaniards scored a massive victory against the Aztecs in the Battle of Otumba, which provided them with enough of an opportunity to reach the Tlaxcalan capital, where they could regroup and stock up on supplies. Cortés and his men spent the next several months in Tlaxcala, and during that time, smallpox was sweeping across central Mexico. It even killed the Aztecs' new leader, Cuitláhuac, and he was replaced with an 18-year-old man named Cuauhtémoc, who was the nephew of Moctezuma. Cuauhtémoc is regarded in Mexico as the last official pre-colonial leader of Tenochtitlan. In the meantime, Cortés began solidifying his alliances with the most powerful native communities in central Mexico. The shakeup in Tenochtitlan's leadership caused a schism among Aztec nobles. At this point, Cortés already had the Totonacas and Tlaxcalans in his camp, but he also added the people of Cholula, Huejotzinco, and other towns. But the crown jewel of these new allies was Texcoco, a town that was at the core of the Aztecs' power base, which sat strategically on the eastern side of Lake Texcoco. They were in a dispute with the Aztec leadership over the appointment of Cuauhtémoc as the new leader of Tenochtitlan. This was enough of a schism for Cortés to exploit and bring Texcoco's leadership over to his side. The Spaniards were now determined to make war on the Aztec capital. Also, for the first time, many of their allies were themselves united with one another. Prior to 1519, many of the communities in central Mexico resented being under the control of the Aztec Empire, but also had hostile relationships with one another, even though they were similarly subjugated by Tenochtitlan. Cortés recognized these divisions across central Mexico and positioned himself as a neutral broker among these diverse groups. The Spaniards and their allies set up camp in Tlaxcala. And it was there they planned out their logistics to attack Tenochtitlan. Cortés devised a plan to capture the city that was perhaps unparalleled in history at the time. In his expeditionary force, there were men who were educated in the most advanced techniques in the art of shipbuilding, and Cortés ordered them to design 13 brigantine ships that they could use to lay siege to Tenochtitlan. Together, they began cutting down trees for wood, and they brought pieces of their ships back from the coast. When the elements of the ships were ready, more than 8,000 Tlaxcalan men helped to carry the pieces to Lake Texcoco, where the ships were assembled. The Aztecs also tried to put together an alliance to defend the capital, but some of their neighboring groups, such as the Purépechas in Michoacán, rejected the proposal. The walls were now closing in on the Aztecs. As part of a last stand, they barricaded themselves on the island. Cortés and his men then launched his newly assembled fleet in Lake Texcoco. The Aztecs fought back by unleashing their own warriors who attacked the ships from canoes, but before long, the Spaniards made it to the island. The Spaniards also damaged the Aztecs' main aqueduct, which provided water to the city. But perhaps the determining factor that spelt doom for the Aztecs was not the Spaniards themselves, but the European diseases that came along with them. While the diseases also impacted the indigenous allies of the Spaniards, the Aztecs were much more vulnerable since their position on the island prevented them from gaining reinforcements, as their warriors were dying from war and disease. Even so, the Aztecs mounted a brave defense of the city until every square inch was conquered. On August 13, 1521, the war ended when Emperor Cuauhtémoc was captured and formally surrendered to Cortés. This marked the beginning of Mexico's incorporation into the Spanish Empire, an era which lasted for the next 300 years. Okay, so in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to find census records that were collected during the colonial period in Mexico. So there are census records for perhaps thousands of towns throughout Mexico, and this spans the period from the 1500s to the early 1800s. This is a census for Urepétiro. It's a small town in Michoacán. But there are many, many more census records available. I'm just using this one as an example. You can see up here, Urepétiro. Okay, so let me just show you what type of information you'll get. Okay, so up here you see the town, okay? This is the name of the town. Here, for each new household, you'll see CA, which stands for casa. So here you have casa, casa, and so on and so forth. So let's just look at this one here. Jose Maria Caballero. Okay, this is the head of household. This funny looking E right here stands for Español. It's an E. And it says C here. This stands for casado. And this shows his age. He's 40 years old. And this is his wife, Maria Josefa Sendejas. And this is her race, Español. She's casada. She's married. And this is her age. She's 38. Here are the children. And you can see that they live here. They're all Españoles, just like their parents. And you see their ages here. Okay, so these census records go on for pages and pages and pages. Again, we are only looking at one small town, and this is only part of the town records for a place in Michoacán. Most people here in this town you can see are Españoles, but if we go over here, we can get an example of a mixed couple. Here we are. Let me see. So let's look at this household here. The head of household is Ramón Gil. He's an Español, 38 years old. And his wife, Maria Josefa, right here, there's a Y. This stands for indígena or indio. And so back then, sometimes they spelled indio with a Y. And so this is her race. She's indigenous. You can see here, this H stands for hijos. So this shows the names of their children, Jose Gabriel and Jose Maria. And you can see here that their race is marked as mestizo or mixed race person. And you can see the ages of the children here on the side. And this just goes on for pages and pages. Now again, this is just a small portion. Now when you get to the very end of the census, you will see a tabulation of the number of people in each ranchito and each pueblito of the district. You can see, I mean, it just goes on and on. So you would be finding whichever town you're looking for. There's like Acumbaro, Fuentecillas. For example, look at this. So Fuentecillas, there's only 4 families. This is familias. With 24 people. So it's 4 families, and altogether it adds up to 24 people. This one here, Huitzo, there's 21 families, and it adds up to 95 people. And so on and so forth. And then for this entire district, there's 3,693 people. And there's 798 families in this area. So yeah, this is an example of the type of census records that you will find. Now, I'm going to show you how to find these. Okay, so you're going to want to get this book, Census Records for Latin America and the Hispanic United States. So basically the entire southwestern United States, and it includes Latin America. And I'll show you how to use this book. You can get the paperback through Amazon, or you could just buy a digital version on Google Books. Now, I'm going to walk you through a couple of steps so you know how to use this book. Okay, so now we're looking inside the book. Here, we're looking at Mexico. Now, remember, this book covers all parts of Latin America, including places in the United States, states in the United States that used to belong to the Spanish Empire. So California, Arizona, Texas, and so on and so forth. So I'm just going to give you a brief example of how to use this book, just the basics, and then you could just take it from there. So look at Aguascalientes. Now in the colonial period, the word for census was padrón. So this is what they would call it. And so whenever you're doing research and you're talking about census records, you would be talking about padrones. So let's just look at Aguascalientes. I'll give you a brief example of how this book works. So we skip over. You can see here, Aguascalientes. Okay, now remember, there are census records for, all states in pretty much every state in Mexico. Okay, look at, now we have, let's just look for one example. The locality. This shows you which cities are being covered. Now right here, this is the state, okay? So if you're from Michoacán, you would look at Michoacán. If you are from Nuevo León, you would look up Nuevo León, and so on and so forth. Locality, this shows you which cities the census records are for, and which province. This would be state, right? So Aguascalientes, country, Mexico. And these are the years they have available. I'm just going to pick one out. Look, this is a census record from 1818. And we have a reference number, 168812. So what are we supposed to do with this reference number? Well, we can plug this reference number into Family Search, and that's where these census records are available. So let's switch over to Family Search and plug in this number, 16882, into their catalog. Now, I have switched over to Family Search. This is the main screen you'll see when you log in. Go to Search. There's the drop-down menu. Click on Catalog. So you can use this film number box. I usually just use keywords because that's just easier. Type in the number there. So 168812. Now remember, we're looking for the census record for the city of Aguascalientes from 1818. Now hit search. Here we go. Padrones. Now you scroll down. You can see all these different census records here, and they all have the reference number 168812. This is it. So we click on it. Ta-da! There we go. Now, unfortunately, a lot of these census records have multiple towns in them, so you're going to have to spend some time looking for your town, but once you find it, you're going to find a wealth of information. So if you have time, you could set aside, go through the pages, find your town. It should answer a lot of your genealogical questions. This is one of the best genealogical tools I have ever found. I have done so much research using
census records. So, I mean, we could just click on any random one here. See, you can see the same kind of stuff I showed you in the example, you see here. See that? Now, so up here in the corner, you could download the census records. You can copy the links for each of these pages. So I hope you found this tutorial helpful. Make sure you get a copy of the book, and then once you have it, you can plug in any of those reference numbers into Family Search. And remember, Family Search is free. I hope you'll be able to use this to fill in a lot of the gaps in your family tree. I know I have. It's been extremely helpful. This might be one of the most important tools you will ever have. So, good luck.